Welcome to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on this video. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And you can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast for free. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Let's get you ready for the Mavericks post All-Star break schedule as the Mavericks at 32-23 get ready to take on the Phoenix Suns on Thursday as they take now their final 27 games of the regular season for the opportunity to solidify themselves in the top 6 of the Western Conference. Throughout our show today, going to give you an outlook on what the Mavericks schedule looks like, give you a breakdown of what their Eastern and Western Conference opponents looks like. We'll also take a look at what they've been doing through their 6-game winning streak, and maybe it gives us an idea about what this team can continue to do going forward, and more importantly, their MVP candidate in Luka Doncic and what he's done so far this year and what he can continue to do to help propel this team forward now that they are after the All-Star break. So a lot to get to in our episode today here on Inside the Mavs. But let's start here. The Mavericks on a 6-game winning streak coming into the All-Star break now get ready to take on the Phoenix Suns and Kevin Durant on Thursday. The Mavericks sit at 7th in the Western Conference right now. With a win, they can find themselves getting into the top 6 by virtue of defeating the Phoenix Suns. But when you look at what they've done throughout their 6-game winning streak, it hopefully gives us an indication on the habits that they've been building and some of the guys that have been playing well during the win streak to be able to give us more of an idea of what they can continue to do moving forward. The obvious acquisitions of P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford. P.J. Washington has been terrific on the defensive end so far with the collective defense that he's been playing multiple positions and giving you a lot of athleticism and size. Daniel Gafford, who has helped this team become a much better rebounding team since he's arrived from the Washington Wizards. Some numbers will help indicate that here in just a moment. So you're still getting Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington meshed into this team to hopefully build some continuity. But as you look back pre-All-Star break, this Mavericks team played more starting lineups than any other team in the NBA. Injuries have taken a toll on this team. Derek Lively, who spoke to the media on Tuesday, says that he will continue to wear a mask for at least the next month as he continues to recover from his broken nose. But at the same time, he will be able to play for the Mavericks now that you have Daniel Gafford, a really nice 1-2 punch at the center position for your starter and for your backup now. But let's take a look at some numbers to give you an idea on what the Mavericks have been doing during this 6-game winning streak. They're number 1 in defensive rating at 102.5. I could stop right there and say that's the biggest difference that we've seen for this team in the last 6 games. Their commitment on the defensive end has been much better. The effort on that end has been much better. And yes, when we look at their 6-game winning streak and who they've beaten, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Nets, the Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, which I would consider the best win of these 6 games so far by beating them 146-111. Then you've got the Washington Wizards win, and then closing out the San Antonio Spurs for your pre-All-Star break schedule, beating them by 23, 116-93. Now, when you look at how they open up their post-All-Star break schedule, you've got the Phoenix Suns. Then you go on a 4-game road trip. That includes the Indiana Pacers, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Toronto Raptors, and the Boston Celtics before you come home to take on the Sixers, Pacers, and the Miami Heat. So if you could continue, if you're the Mavericks, to play the kind of consistent defense that we have seen, and I don't want you to necessarily worry about the opponent during the 6-game winning streak. What I want you to concern yourself with are the things that they're doing differently in terms of how they can position themselves to play that same way against some of the better teams of the East and the West down the stretch in their final 27 games. And what have they been doing differently? Let's take a look at the numbers. Block shots. They're averaging 6.3 block shots per game during their 6-game winning streak. That's good for 5th in the NBA. They're number 1 in the league in rebounds per game at 49. We just talked about the difference that Daniel Gafford has made on both the offensive and defensive glass. And now with the return and hopefully consistent now play of Derek Lively within the starting lineup for this Mavericks team, those numbers will continue to swell, especially on the defensive glass, where part of being a good defensive team is closing out possessions and limiting teams to just one shot. And so far during the 6-game winning streak, we are seeing a much more improved rebounding team. And that should be a much better thing for the Mavericks going forward as well, because we know that this team has not been a good rebounding team for quite some time. And we've maligned that for a long time when discussing what the Mavericks have to do in order to get better. They're doing that now in terms of their rebounding. Other numbers that help give you a better picture of what they've been doing during their 6-game winning streak. 7th in the NBA right now in offensive rating in their last 6 games at 119.8, which means they are 3rd overall in net rating at a plus 17.3 during their 6-game winning streak. The 6 games that they've won in a row are tied for the longest current win streak in the NBA with the Boston Celtics, which they will see that Celtics team on Friday, March the 1st. So when you just look at what the Mavericks have done so far, they've been able to improve on the defensive end. They're rebounding at a much better rate. They are also able to block shots and be able to close out possessions with defensive rebounds as well. And they're getting contributions from their new guys in P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, who are having immediate impacts and paying off immediate dividends in the areas where the Mavericks need them to do most. As we mentioned, number 1 in defensive rating. P.J. Washington has been spectacular on the defensive end. Daniel Gafford in terms of the rebound that he's provided. Obviously, the Mavericks have improved in that area. So you're seeing how some of these things are starting to come together based on the way that they play. And, of course, Luka Doncic, who leads the NBA in scoring, averaging over 34 points per game, is going to continue to lead you on the offensive end. Let's take a quick break here and hear from today's video partner, Mint Mobile. And on the other side, we'll dive into more and what the Mavericks have been doing to get themselves in position for their post-All-Star break run. Today's video partner is Mint Mobile. Have you ever thought, why in the world is my wireless bill so high? What am I actually paying for? Speed, data, coverage, access to 5G, mobile hotspots, unlimited talk and text? What am I actually getting for all of this? Mint Mobile offers all these features for as low as $15 a month. And that's why I've partnered with Mint Mobile. They reimagined the wireless shopping experience and made it easy and online. No stores, no salespeople, just huge direct-to-you savings. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to premium wireless? Mint Mobile runs on the nation's largest 5G network. Go to mintmobile.com, also linked in my description, to get premium wireless for $15 a month. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to digital eSIM cards, which most phones now have, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your own home. If your phone doesn't have an eSIM, Mint will ship you a new SIM card for free. Big Wireless wants you to think that they're the only option. Don't be duped. Go to mintmobile.com/Kevin Gray, also linked in my description, to stop paying more than what you have to for your phone plan.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. Enticing, right?
Back here on Inside the Mavs as we continue to take a look at the Mavericks as we get you a preview of their post-All-Star break schedule as they play their final 27 games of the regular season as they make a push toward the top 6 of the Western Conference. Before the break, we were detailing what the Mavericks have been doing during their 6-game winning streak and the contributions that Daniel Gafford and P.J. Washington have provided so far for this team. And with hopefully improved health, with obviously already the return of Derek Lively, hopefully the return of Dante Exum here soon from his right knee soreness will allow this team to continue to build that much more depth going forward for the rest of the year. Jason Kidd talking about it on Tuesday, saying hopefully that Exum comes back during the road trip that they will go on beginning on Sunday when they take on the Indiana Pacers. But let's look at the final 27 games of this season. As we mentioned, the Mavericks taking on the Phoenix Suns on Thursday night at the American Airlines Center, where they have a chance to climb into the top 6 of the West. As you break down their final 27 regular season games, it goes a little something like this. You've got 11 home games for the Mavericks, 16 road games, which includes a separate 4- and 5-game road trip during those final 16 road games. Their opponent win percentage is .495, which is the 10th easiest in the NBA during the final 27 games of the regular season. They've got 14 games against the West and 13 games against the Eastern Conference. So that gives you a little bit of a breakdown on what the Mavericks will be facing as they move forward for the rest of the regular season. And that third part I want to focus on here. Their opponent win percentage is going to be a combined .495, the 10th easiest in the league. That means this team will have several opportunities to get some really nice wins to really push themselves as far as the top 6 of the West. You look at their first 5 games coming out of the post-All-Star break schedule, it's going to be pretty difficult. You got Phoenix. You got to go on the road to Indiana. You take on Cleveland, who's been one of the hottest teams in the league over the last couple of months. Then you go on the road to take on the Toronto Raptors. Then you face arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference in the Boston Celtics. Then you come home against the Sixers, Pacers, and the Miami Heat before you take on March 9th, the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls on March 11th before you come back home to take on the Golden State Warriors on March the 13th. So you see how difficult their first several games are to traverse post All-Star break. Now, if you're looking for those wins against the Toronto Raptors on the road on February 28th, you believe that that's a win there. A depleted Philadelphia 76ers team that has no Joel Embiid, and you saw that the Mavericks were able to handle them on the road back on February 5th, where they won 118-102 as part of their current 6-game winning streak. Obviously, Chicago has not been very good so far this year, the inconsistency and up and down nature for them. So as you look at their schedule, you start to parse out where they can find some wins, but at the same time, they'll need to steal a couple, especially as you look at that road trip when they take on the Pacers and the Cleveland Cavaliers before they take on the Boston Celtics after taking on the Toronto Raptors. But with all that being said, you have a chance to make up some ground with a schedule that lends itself to an opportunity to be able to win some games. And when you look at what Luka Doncic has been doing so far this year, number 1 in the NBA in scoring. He's 3rd in the league in assists this season. He's also number 7 in steals, and he's number 2 in three-pointers made. What I'm getting at is you continue to rack up wins and continue to climb up the Western Conference standings, the MVP case for Luka Doncic continues to get stronger and stronger. Let's think about it. You've got Nikola Jokic, you've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you've got Giannis Antetokounmpo right now as your top 3 MVP candidates. If Luka Doncic and this team, who are right now a season high 9 games above 500, find themselves getting to the top 6, maybe climbing into the top 5 of the West, and a team that can be double-digit games above 500, I should say, you're looking at an MVP candidate that's legit, and based on the output that he's been putting together throughout the course of the year, especially on the offensive end, with not just the scoring that he's doing, but also the generating of everything else in terms of the other guys scoring themselves, you're looking at one of the leading MVP candidates. We talked about it in our last episode. Luka Doncic right now is 3rd in the NBA at unrealized assists, but he's generating the best shot quality of any player in the NBA. So for other guys like the Kyrie Irvings of the world, the Josh Greens, whomever you want to name, if they are going to make teams pay, Luka Doncic's MVP case becomes that much stronger. And that's where we look at this team as a whole. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are going to give you nearly 60 points a night. Kyrie Irving, after coming back from his injury at the beginning of January, has been spectacular on both ends of the floor. You saw the kind of shot creativity and shot making that he did against the San Antonio Spurs. As long as Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic remain healthy, they are the best backcourt duo in the NBA. There are no 2 better guards in a starting lineup in today's NBA than Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, given the amount of creativity that they can both do for themselves when it comes to scoring, but also setting up other teammates as well. And speaking of one of those teammates we mentioned earlier, Daniel Gafford right now is number 1 in the NBA in field goal percentage. So when you're getting better defensive play on one end, the amount of scoring that you're going to continue to see on the other end, where right now the Mavericks are 11th in the NBA in offensive rating And as they continue to play with the kind of pace that we've seen them play with so far this year, they're 8th right now in the NBA in pace. Combining that with better defense, you're going to find a team that can beat you in multiple ways. We've talked about it some once the acquisitions of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford were made. You've got a 10-man rotation now, especially when you're healthy, that allows you a lot of versatility to do a lot of different things from the defensive coverage standpoint, but also on offense. Think about a Maxi Kleber, for example. Now he's not only going to be able to come off the bench, but he can provide you with the multiple versatile aspects that he can do on defense, whether it be guarding multiple positions on the defensive end, but then on the offensive end, knocking down three-pointers, being able to attack the rim with much more confidence on closeouts, and be able to make some things happen offensively where he doesn't need necessarily to just stand around and wait for guys to pass him the ball to knock down shots, although primarily that's what he's able to do in stretching the floor on the offensive end. That's just one example of a guy now who's properly slotted in the position that he needs to based on how much deeper your team is because of the acquisitions that you were able to make in PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. And here's something else that we've got to make sure that we discuss here today. We've talked about some of the things that the Mavericks have been doing from an overall team aspect, whether it be defensive rating, offensive rating over the last 6 games and what they've been able to do. One thing that the Mavericks have been consistent on throughout the course of the year is their ability to protect the basketball. So far this year, they are the 3rd best team in the NBA, only turning the ball over 12.5 times per game. So when you're scoring at the kind of rate that the Mavericks do, when you're playing the much better defense that you're capable of playing, but also you're protecting the ball and able to close out possessions with defensive rebounds, now you're limiting opportunities for teams to take advantage of you, and you are also limiting mistakes as a defense and as an offense if you're the Dallas Mavericks. And one of the things that I've loved watching about this team as the season has gone on is their ability to get out in the fast break, pushing the pace against other teams to get easy buckets, and that's predicated on your ability to not only protect the ball, but also be able to get stops on the defensive end. So for the Mavericks, they have multiple ways that they can beat you, and as they continue to coalesce together, this is a team that you can look at to be at one of the more dangerous teams in the NBA. You know that they're going to shoot the ball at a pretty high clip. They are 10th in the NBA in 3-point field goal percentage this year. They're also 7th in the league in points per game. So we know how lethal they're going to be offensively every single night. It's about, can they put it together on the defensive end? Overall this season, they're 19th in the NBA in defensive rating, but as we noted earlier, have been much better as of late. And as they play against more quality opponents, you're hoping that those habits will continue to build for this Mavericks team for the rest of the season. And if so, now we can start looking at this team as a more dangerous one in the Western Conference. Make no mistake about it. Obviously, with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the length and the size that they present with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, the athleticism of an Anthony Edwards, you look at the same athleticism in a guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's one of the best guards and one of the best players in the league, top 5 in scoring, also the #1 steals guy in the NBA. He drives that engine for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't have to say anything about Nikola Jokic and what he does for the Denver Nuggets as the literal hub for everything that they do every single night. Kevin Durant for the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, for the Los Angeles Clippers, if Kawhi Leonard remains healthy, that is a dangerous team along with Paul George, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, who's embraced his role in coming off the bench for the Clippers. You can see the amount of teams, even the New Orleans Pelicans, who are playing terrific under Willie Green right now with Zion Williamson as their primary ball handler. There's a lot of stiff competition in the West, and you still got to look and remember to hold off teams like the Los Angeles Lakers, like the Golden State Warriors, and others who are going to be trying to get themselves and claw themselves in the top 6 of the West. But for their outlook, this is all going to be about Luka Doncic. Here's another thing to give you indication on how much we talked about Nikola Jokic and how everything goes through him. For Luka Doncic, it's the same thing. So far, Luka Doncic leads the league in both time of possession at 8.6 minutes per game and isolation possessions at 7.2 per game. His 1.10 points per possession on isolations ranks 5th among 38 players with at least 100 total isolation possessions, according to Synergy. We know how well he's able to do in one-on-one situations and being able to take advantage of that. But what you may not know is that Luka Doncic has been one of the best isolation and post defenders so far this year, too. It's his commitment on the defensive end that's really going to help continue to drive the Mavericks, and everyone will have to fall in line. And for Jason Kidd, his ability to get the most out of this team will be the number one factor going forward here. Because, yes, you need good health. You need P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, especially in Washington's case, to get much better in knocking down open three-pointers, because we talked about it a little bit earlier. For guys like Derrick Jones Jr., P.J. Washington, Dante Exum, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jaden Hardy in some cases as well, these guys have got to make teams pay for leaving them wide open. And the consistencies that you've seen from both Josh Green and Jaden Hardy really over the last month should give Mavericks fans a lot more confidence in their ability to continue to play that way going forward. Because here's how I look at the starting lineup for the Mavericks. You've got Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, obviously, as your top two. Josh Green needs to remain in your starting five if you're the Mavericks as your small forward. P.J. Washington, I believe, should slide in as your starting number 4. And then Derek Lively, who has earned the right to be your starting center this season, remains in that starting center role. So you've got a starting five of Luka, Kyrie, Josh Green, P.J. Washington, and Derek Lively, who's emerged arguably as your third best player so far this year. And then you've got a rotation behind them that includes Derrick Jones Jr., that also includes Dante Exum when he's healthy, obviously for Daniel Gafford, Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber. You see where I'm going here. You got a much deeper team that can fit into each position that you're looking for. And with Kyrie Irving leading that second unit, and you saw the way that he took over in that second quarter against the San Antonio Spurs, now you've got guys in each position that can fulfill and, more importantly, play the same type of style no matter who's on the floor, because that's all that you're looking for, not obviously just from your starting five, but from your second five as well. Can you continue to play with the continued style of play that you want to, regardless of who is on the floor? And based on the personnel that the Mavericks have now, you can play the same way with your starting five and with your next five as well. That improves continuity, it improves consistency, and the same message now resonates throughout the entire 10-man rotation about what it means to be in a guy that means to be consistency going forward. So for the Mavericks, you look at a lot of different things that they've been able to do so far this year, and now you have a better picture and idea of what that looks like for them going forward for the rest of the year. I'm excited to see what this group does based on what they've been able to achieve, the adversity they've been able to overcome this year with the injuries that they've dealt with. But most importantly now, they have a chance to build and grow with the pieces that they've acquired. And now with their consistency, with their understanding, and their growth within both the offensive and defensive schemes that the Mavericks are looking to incorporate going forward, now this team becomes that much more dangerous. Because when you've got Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving spearheading this team, now guys have got to fall in line based off of what is being asked of them from a vision standpoint, night in and night out. And that is an exciting aspect for this Mavericks team. So we've looked at what they've done in terms of their 6-game winning streak. We've also looked at what the outlook for this team is going forward for the rest of the year. The question now ultimately becomes, how far can they go? This team, based on the way that they played over the last 6 games and really over the last month, this will be a team that will be in the play-in at minimum. And most importantly, in my mind, I believe they will be in the top 6 when it's all said and done at the end of the regular season. Granted, this team stays healthy. They've got a schedule that allows them to rack up some wins. They are now finding their identity on both the offensive and defensive ends with the personnel that they've acquired. You've got a top 5 talent in the league in Luka Doncic and a top 15 player in Kyrie Irving alongside him. So you've got your perfect Batman and Robin. You've got your role players now situated in the positions that they are in to succeed. And that's where Jason Kidd comes in. Can he put this team and his players in position to succeed? night in and night out. You've heard it from players like Maxi Kleba, among others, that they believe this coaching staff gives them really good game plans night in and night out to be able to be in the best spot to succeed given the opponent that they will play. And that for the Mavericks is going to be key. Adapting to who they play each and every night, not playing down the competition, because at times this team has a tendency to do that, to play down to their opponent. When you're trying to get to the top 6 of the West, there can be no nights where you're playing down to your competition. You've got to take advantage of the opportunities when you need to. No slow starts like you saw against the San Antonio Spurs. Similarly, against the Washington Wizards. You cannot have those games where you're playing down to competition and allowing them to stay in games that they have no business being in. Take the example that they had against the Oklahoma City Thunder, where they destroyed them from the outset, winning that game 146-111. They did not allow Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and that Oklahoma City Thunder to breathe. That is the mentality that the Mavericks have to take in night after night, and it starts on Thursday when they take on Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and the Phoenix Suns. You have a chance, if you're the Mavericks, to send a clear message to the rest of the Western Conference at the very beginning of your post-All-Star break schedule by handling business against the Suns. And that is that you mean business, that you are in position to make a run for it for the final 27 games of the season. And most importantly, you would get to a season-high 10 games above 500 at 33-23. That would be huge for this team, given everything that it's been through to get to this point. Will they have enough down the stretch and enough gas left in the tank to continue to sustain what they've been able to do? It's taken a lot for them to get to this point, but now they are here with new reinforcements in the likes of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. But for me, that's going to be the most important. Can you set the tone at the very beginning of your post-All-Star break schedule by taking out a very good Phoenix Suns team, obviously, in terms of Kevin Durant and what they present? And now are you able to now put yourself in a spot going on a 4-game road trip to take advantage of some opportunities? The difficult schedule will obviously be there with Indiana, Cleveland, Toronto, and Boston before you come home for 3 games against the Sixers, Pacers again, and the Miami Heat. Take advantage of the opportunities that you can. Continue to build on the habits that you've put forward so far to your 6-game winning streak. And then as you continue to watch the rest of the Western Conference in front of you, now make up ground when you have the opportunities to do it. When you take on the Oklahoma City Thunder on the road on March 14th, when you take on the Denver Nuggets back at home at the American Airlines Center on March the 17th. There are plenty of opportunities to keep teams down that are behind you, like a Golden State when they take on the Golden State Warriors at the AAC on March the 13th, and hopefully make up some ground and be able to move up the West when you're taking on some of the better teams in the West, as I mentioned, with the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets, and others. Now this team can really find themselves getting into a groove to make things happen in the West. But this team has got a lot of excitement in front of them. You've seen how this team has been able to grow throughout the course of the year, stay healthy, gain consistency, and more importantly, continuity and chemistry for this team going forward for the rest of the year. This is a very dangerous Mavericks team that could be on the way in the West. And that, for me and for all of us, should be exciting about what's to come over the final 27 games of the regular season. And there's a lot to play out still. And hopefully for this team, it's about winning and winning at a high rate, given the schedule that will allow them to do so. We'll see for the Mavericks as they get ready to take on the Phoenix Suns on Thursday to begin their final 27 games of the regular season. Really appreciate you joining me for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, make sure you like and comment on the video if you're watching it on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. If you're listening to it on the podcast, make sure you give it a 5-star rating, write a review for it while you're there, and check it out and let your friends and family know to download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, wherever you get your podcast for free on Apple, Spotify, and of course on iHeartRadio. And you can catch me every single Mavericks radio broadcast as I'm the Mavericks pre and post game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks radio network. I'll have the pregame beginning at 6 p.m. on Thursday when the Mavericks take on the Phoenix Suns at the AAC. And, of course, for every Maverick game, you can listen to me on 97.1 The Freak. Again, this has been Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. My name is Kevin Gray, and I'll talk to you next time on our next episode of Inside the Mavs. We'll talk to you later. Peace.